manager, is it just you or?
No, Haley is there. We were stuck in some
You can
lots of
cross the
traffic.
street because there's no crosswalk there.
Yeah.
We're
We're
good.
live.
One step from that.
I can do the backup.
Is it on a flash?
You probably could do a better job than me.
I'm gonna be an hour.
Haley is walking in with the stick. We
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. It's 5:45 on Wednesday, September 13th, and I'm calling to order the special meeting of the Board of the Moraga Geologic Hazard Abatement District. I note for the record that all board members are present. Next, we have public comment. This is time reserved for those in the audience who wish to address the GAD board. We'll also take public comment on every agenda item coming up. Marty, do we have any public comment?
None.
Okay, no public comments, so I will close the public comment period. Next is adoption of the consent agenda. We have one item, which is the minutes of our August meeting. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion, Onoda, second, Woolicki. Any public comment? No public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. It passes unanimously. Adoption of the meeting agenda. Can I get a motion? Motion.
Second.
Second, Onoda and Woolicki again. And any public comment? I see no public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It passes unanimously. Next is request for action other business, and that is the agreement for cell tower lease assignments. Now, as the board will recall, this item was continued from our last meeting. We continued it to allow the GAD manager to collect some additional information and to answer questions that were posed by board members. I want to thank Haley, Yuri, and Eric for gathering the requested information, enhancing the staff report, and meeting or speaking to board members prior to the meeting. Thank you for your diligence, for your responsiveness. So tonight we're being asked whether to authorize a resolution that allows for the assignment of rights and rents under a cell tower lease. It would go from the Moraga GHAD to AP Wireless Investments. As you'll recall, in May, we authorized a similar assignment of the other cell tower installation. And as before, we're in the position of having to decide whether it's better for the GAD and for the residents of Bella Vista to take a lump sum payment up front and bolster the reserve, or to continue with an income stream that is guaranteed under the lease. So what we're going to do is have a presentation from Haley and Yuri. Thank you for coming, which will be focused on kind of doing a side-by-side analysis of our options in terms of the financial risk and reward and the risk and reward. Then we'll have board member questions, public comment, and bring it back to the board for its consideration and deliberation. And with that, Haley, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chair Sauce and board members. Good evening. Uri Eliyahu and I will be presenting this item, mostly Uri, but and I'll flip through the slideshows. Thanks, Uri.
Good evening, board members. We're here to present something that is very, very similar to the presentation that we made regarding the other cellular provider. It is an offer to give us a lump sum payment in exchange for assigning the revenue stream that comes from that lease. Next slide. So just a bit of history here. A lease agreement was executed, as you can see, 12 years ago between the developer and GTE, now known as Verizon. It should be noted that this agreement provides for 5-year option periods that end in 2035. So for it to extend to 2035, Verizon would have to exercise its option in 2025 and again in 2030. Also, at the time that we prepared the engineer's report for the GAD, we anticipated this revenue stream, and for that reason, the residents within Bella Vista now are paying something less than the limit under the Prop 218 authorized assessment. As part of the transfer from the developer to the GAD, which occurred in 2021, the lease was assigned to the GAD and, of course, the revenue that comes with that lease. Next slide. All right, so the lease payments began at $10,000 a year with 3% annual renewals, which puts them at about $14,500 a year now for this year with that escalation. And the last bullet there shows that the actual levy is about 12% below what the assessment limit has grown to. The assessment limit under Prop 218 is also indexed to CPI. And so because of the lease revenue, there is a reduction in the levy to something below the cap. Next slide. Just a few exhibits here. I think board members are familiar with the site, and you can see there's that sort of extension at the northwest end, and that is where Fay Hill Road is. Maybe we can go to the next exhibit. And what you can see there between the yellow lines is the PG&E easement. That easement agreement was executed, I think, in 1946. It was in the 1940s. And these two cellular companies have constructed those two sort of pads that you see in the green rectangles, one for each of those two carriers. And that is what the lease payments are for. It should also probably be noted that they have installed equipment on the PG&E tower that's right there, and they have a separate agreement with PG&E that we're not privy to, and they draw power from PG&E, which they also pay for. So they have some sort of a lease agreement, again, that we don't have in our possession, and they pay for the power consumption. So what we're really leasing to them is the land that is represented by those green rectangles. Here's just another view of that. Those are the two green rectangle areas, if you will. And there's their equipment on the tower, which again doesn't really relate to the GAD. Okay. So if we do just simple math and show the current values and current revenue streams, we can see that in the current sort of scenario, the annual payment is about $14,500. And option A would provide a lower revenue stream, so I think that probably doesn't deserve much discussion. Option B is probably the interesting one. They've offered about $101,500 as a lump sum under option B. Next slide. If we then do a future value analysis, and again, comparing the base case to option B, assuming that we can earn a 4, 5, and 6% annual return on the reserve, the invested reserve, we can see then the comparison between the existing lease and option B. You can see that there's a significant future value difference between retaining the revenue stream and selling it. So again, that shouldn't be a big surprise. The buyer of the revenue stream hopes to make money with that investment, but you can see that there's under the 6% scenario, there's a little over a 1.5 factor between the two, and maybe a little more than that under the 4% scenario. Next slide. So in your board packet, there is a resolution to accept the option B. And I think we'd like to share a few thoughts about that. First of all, we have done a fair amount of additional analysis and a fair amount of additional discussion and work on this since the staff report was prepared. And I think we're prepared to recommend that we retain the revenue stream and not sell it. However, the board should be aware of two risks in doing that. One is the simple risk of assuming that there will be 2 additional 5-year renewals between now and 2035. And the other is that we're assuming that we won't have a need for that reserve, that we won't have a need for that increment in our reserve in that time period. If we have to borrow, particularly, small amounts can be very expensive for GHADs to borrow. And especially in light of the fact that with the first lease, we took the sort of burden the hand approach, the conservative approach to build up our reserve. This is a reasonable thing to consider for the board. And really, we're just looking for input.
Thank you. And I'm sure we will provide it. So, but thank you for the presentation. Would you be willing to take some questions now?
Oh, please.
Okay, Steve.
Sure. Can we go back to slide 8? Okay.
Your mic?
It's on.
Okay, I hear you.
I'm just not speaking into the mic. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. So under the existing lease, it says there a payment with 3% annual increase, right?
Correct.
And you use a rate of return of 4%, right?
On the 4% on the earned portion at any given time. In other words, the assumption is that the lease revenue goes right in the bank and earns 4%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I add 3 plus 4%, I get 7%. Right?
Yes, but it's not over the whole revenue stream. In other words, the last payment would receive no benefit from earning 4%.
Oh, that's fine. That's a, yeah, understand that. Or that's a nuance. What I come out with at year 12, actually at a 4% rate of return, is
$8,000 higher.
it doesn't necessarily try. Well, it's 296, so it's close.
Yeah.
Okay, it's close.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go along with that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So we just took every payment and resolved it to future value.
Right. And you did use the 7% thing?
Yeah, but again, it's.
Oh, except for the last.
Except, right, it's, well, and, right, every payment
Yeah,
has its remaining earning potential.
Sure.
And also
sure.
the first payment doesn't benefit from the 3%. So with all of that considered, that's what it is.
And you didn't look beyond the 2035 date?
We did not. That's the end of the lease.
Right,
Yep.
okay.
Carrie?
I'm going to ask, just for the record, some of the same questions that I asked last time this came up, which is, in your experience managing GADs, are you aware of a cellular company that ever voluntarily chose to forego a lease?
We are not.
And I think that goes to one other question that I had, which is just a point of clarification. When the Planning Commission on multiple occasions reviewed these specific cellular locations, there were numerous instances where the leaseholder did not follow the conditions of approval, specifically with regards to compliance with planting plans. There was also issues with the colors of the fencing slats being incorrect. If the GAD were to sell the lease to these, would that limit the town's ability to hold the leaseholder to the conditions of approval? And how much more difficult might it be because right now the town has the option of, when it comes back up again, if you didn't follow the conditions of approval, then you can enforce those conditions and ask them to go back out and fix. If you didn't have that ability to enforce that because you sold the lease off, how would we hold them accountable?
So we didn't ask that exact question to legal counsel, but we did ask very explicitly, is the GAD taking on any obligation that it, by selling the lease, that it wouldn't otherwise have? And is there any exposure to the GAD that it wouldn't otherwise have? And we did receive a response that the answer to both is no. That the assignment agreement does repeat some of the language that's in the underlying lease, but it doesn't add additional burden. Now, that may or may not fully answer your question. In other words, who would the town go after? And
if I can interrupt, and what would the trigger be if we had an issue to actually go after them? Since currently the hook we have is their lease is up. Why didn't you do what you were supposed to?
Can David and I insert ourselves here? I think, Carrie, that's a great question, and I think there's two things here. There's the lease itself, right? Which my read of it is there is no obligation for landscaping or other beautification. It just goes to use of the fenced-in area and access to it. So, but I think, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, that with the assignment would run the obligations under the conditions of approval. So the town could then still enforce, I'm sorry, the landlord's obligations go in the assignment, but the tenants do not change, right? Because they're still a party. And so I think that the question, the question was also raised about the landscaping down below and those conditions of approval. And I think what we might want to do is, if the board is so inclined, is to ask staff at some point to look into what our options are with respect to both the landscaping around the cell tower and the landscaping down on Ream, because those are two separate things.
Okay.
Is that agreeable to everybody?
Absolutely agreeable.
I've got a question about this before
Yeah.
I agree.
And I just had one, if it's specific to that, I had one other follow-up
It
question,
is.
but I can, okay.
It is. My
I'll come back to you.
understanding is when there's a lease or anything with conditions of approval, no matter who is the person who's leasing, the conditions of approval go with the lay of the land.
Yes.
So anything So maybe that answers a
I
question.
think I think we're consistent.
Okay.
It's, the obligations are still there. They're not going
Right.
to evaporate, and the town still has all of its rights.
That's right,
and
no matter who
authority
the
over-
lease is.
Right, but it will still be Verizon.
Right.
Or,
Or, I'm sorry.
Even if
is
it's
it-
not.
wait, do I have the right?
Yeah.
It is Verizon.
So if I understand, if that's happens, if you assign the lease and get paid a lump sum of money, right? So in the assignment, you could actually make explicit whatever your concerns are. Fair? Whatever Carrie's concerns are, and I'm not sure I even understand them all, but I don't need to, about landscaping. But if that's a concern, and we're signing the lease, and, you know, GAD is being paid for it by the cell company, you could, in the assignment, that the cell company and the assignee both sign, have them agree to do what you want them to do.
But the town is not a party to this assignment. The obligation runs to the town, not to the GAD,
Yeah, but-
not to the S&E, not to the S&R. It's a separate and distinct set of obligations and rights. And I think those still exist vis-à-vis both the lessee and the lessor. And so what I would suggest that I was asking if the board agreed was for staff to take a look at what conditions of approval exist down below, and then what if anything exists up around the cell towers, because I don't know if there are any conditions of approval.
Do we have the GAD, I'm sorry to insert, but do we have the ability as the GAD to ask the GAD staff to verify that irrespective of the outcome on the assignment of the lease, or would that have to be a separate communication to town staff?
I think that is outside the scope of the GAD manager's responsibilities.
Yeah, the GAD doesn't have land use planning authority.
Got it. The only other follow-up question that I had was, this seemed very similar to what, as the mayor had indicated. Is there any significant difference other than a difference in location or the arrangements? Didn't have the other stat.
There's zero difference in the language.
Okay.
And it is the same buyer that wishes to purchase this revenue stream. Yeah, it's
Thank you.
identical.
Steve?
Thank you, Mayor. Two more questions, really. Yuri, did we get resolution on, do we know who PG&E is paying lease payments to, if they are, and what that agreement is, and, you know, has it expired, and can we take control of the land? And
There's a perpetual easement in 1946, I think, 1940-something, that doesn't provide us revenue and doesn't apparently
doesn't end.
give us any ability to reclaim that land, if you will. But that hasn't been run by legal counsel. That's us reviewing the easement, and it looks like a perpetual easement. And if there was payment associated with it, it would have been in the 1940s with the landowner. But
Sure.
for all we know, it was condemned. We really don't know how it came to
Right.
be.
Okay. And just confirming, on option B, what we are really selling is a 45-year period of time, even though the lease only goes for 12 years, from 12 to 45, which is another 33 years, they basically have control over that piece of land. Is that correct?
Yeah, if the lease is renewed.
Well, no, even if the lease is not renewed and someone else comes in and plucks their cell tower equipment on that spot, they have the right to do that.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay.
I'd like to return to Board Member Hillis's question about termination of cellular leases. We did ask the GAD treasurer as well if they had experience with terminations of leases, and they did. However, they pointed out that lately, cellular real estate investment trusts, REITs, have gone down in value substantially. That may not be reflective of some new technology that makes this obsolete. It may or may not, but that was part of their answer.
Any other questions?
Yes.
David?
I had a couple of questions. So on page 3 of the report, it has different numbers, dollar numbers. I may have missed, you may have explained that. No, go back to that chart that was just up there. Yeah, no. No.
No,
One you were
the future
before,
value.
Haley,
The future value.
that's it.
Yeah.
Right, so in the page 3, it has just some different numbers. You may have updated this.
We updated, this is a future value table, and that exhibit was,
This is on, right under the discussion in the memo on page 3. Maybe it's a different chart, and maybe
I mean, these,
Okay.
these supersede, right?
Yeah.
What is in the staff report, right?
yeah, so the numbers that you see on page 3 are essentially nominal dollars. And so what this is just bringing all of the values to a fixed point in time, and that fixed point in time is 2035.
Yeah, but in the report, it's also going to 2035 on page 3. You see, it says 229,000 versus 288. This is probably not a big deal. Maybe there is something I'm missing here. But what you're saying here in the slide that's up on the TV is that, for example, if we stick with the lease and don't sell it, don't assign it, then assuming there's a rate of return of 4%, GAD will have $288,000. Am I reading that right? Okay.
2035. I'm sorry.
Okay.
That is correct.
So I also thought I heard you say while you were doing your main presentation that you're actually thinking now that maybe just stick with us getting the lease payments, right? And the numbers up there, putting aside any risks of us holding on to these leases, that somebody invents a new technology and they're completely useless, right, these leases, and so we don't get any money, and we could have bird in the hand kind of money right now, right? But assuming that doesn't happen, that makes more sense, is what I think you were saying.
That's right. If not for those two, assuming we assign a small probability to those two risks, that is, one, that we would have need for this money because of some landslide event or something, and two, that the tenant won't renew, that the lessee won't renew. Absolutely, the existing revenue stream is preferable.
Okay.
It's better for the guest.
So then my last question is, assuming you have a crystal ball, putting aside the technologies change and all this could be completely valueless at some point, what do you anticipate the need of GAD to have a lump sum of money now versus an income stream?
Yeah. So based on a lot of work that we do to try to develop these budgets, we estimated, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, in the original engineer's report, something like $1 million hit every 10 years. I think that's right. That's a probabilistic thing that depends on geology and 100 years of rainfall and all sorts of things. I will say that that risk is lower in the early years. Those slopes weather like our the paint on our house weathers. And that's why GADs are so valuable, because no project in geologic units like this can reduce post-construction residual risk to zero. But we modeled it as $1 million event every 10 years or something like that. And we have a 40 or 50-year model that provides for sufficient reserve to be able to take one of those hits. If you can imagine the GAD building up reserve and then having a dip of $1 million and then building up, if you draw a line between all the troughs, all the low points, we want, in real terms, a positive slope to that line. So what is the probability? I would guess it's probably 5% in any given year. Also, these things don't happen like we modeled, like it's exactly $1 million event. And so we may get lesser events. We may get $250,000 event twice in that time period or something like that. But I would guess a 5% probability in any given rain year.
So if there's a really bad rain like last year, how was this affected by that rain?
It performed well. You know, we had the minor erosion and things. You know, we had the minor cleanup, but it performed well.
But we have to pay for that. The lessee doesn't have to pay anything.
Oh, right. The GAD is responsible
I see.
for
Okay.
the stability.
All right.
And again, when it's new and it's all freshly, compacted and the irrigation water hasn't been fully absorbed, it is more stable. They perform well in the early years.
Any other questions? Teresa?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So let's say technology changes and they don't need this anymore, and they want to end the lease. Do they have to put the land back the way it was? Do they have to remove the tower, remove all of their stuff?
The tower it belongs to PG&E. Those two green rectangles, I'm actually not sure if they have to remove all that. But that's all that it would be. It wouldn't be the tower.
I see.
I don't know.
That would be in the town's documentation.
Right. So that's why I'm
But
wondering.
whatever that obligation is what it is.
Right.
They would be assuming that obligation.
It would be in the use permit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Haley?
Sorry, Chair Sauce. Board Member Shapiro, I did look at the table presented in the staff report compared to what we presented here. The difference is the table in the staff report did not apply the 4%, 5%, and 6% to the two line items above, but this table does. So I believe that's where the difference is.
I see, because I see the 4%, the rate of return was to the options
For
B and
the,
C.
correct.
Got it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sorry, just last question, and this was a question that was provoked by Board Member Wolicki's questioning regarding whether or not there's any residual revenue that are being received due to the. So maybe the GAD staff aren't the ones that can answer this, but my understanding is that in most communities where utilities operate, they're required to pay franchise fees, which go to the community for the operation within that community. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that usually applies to public rights of way. Perhaps the town manager could weigh in on this, but where those utilities are in public rights of way, there are usually franchise agreements with consideration.
And we can follow up on that.
Thank you.
Yes.
One more question. Is this land where these two, AT&T and the other one, is that on John Muir Land Trust or?
No, it's on GAD land.
No, it's on
GAD.
in the GAD property.
It's in the GAD.
Just
It's
barely.
before you get to the gate where the John Muir land
Okay.
starts, is on that
It's before.
concrete path.
Yeah,
It's before it's
I know, I
under-
just didn't
inside
know
the
where.
GAD.
No, the
where
GAD,
it's-
the John Muir land starts at that gate.
Oh, wow.
That- Right there.
Right there. Okay, good, thank you.
Yuri, if I may so if we keep the lease, those payments go right into the reserve, right?
Right.
So for this year, we'd be looking at putting 14,000 in the reserve if we maintain status quo versus 162,000 if we took the lump sum.
That's correct, and there would actually be a little more going into reserve. So we had programmed a certain amount of money going into reserve.
Right.
That's greater than 14,000. This is just an offset against that.
But one of the things you guys do is you sort of monitor the level of the reserve and, you know, with your models about the every 10-year $1 million risk and so forth. And my understanding is it's your view and our treasurer's view that our level of reserve right now is sufficient and is growing at the rate that we forecast and we need it to.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So we have a projection of reserve accumulation. And until we achieve some target reserve, there is a time period where the reserve is insufficient to take care of a big event.
Right.
In theory, if we have done a good job predicting the magnitude and frequency of the large-scale events, we should be somewhat indifferent as to when they occur, because if we don't have enough, theoretically, we can borrow and it all works out. And so that question comes up a lot. What if the big one hits in year 2?
Right.
Well, it really theoretically shouldn't matter much.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? All right. Any public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment. All right, guys. What would you like to do? David, you want to start?
Sure. I typically like the idea of bird in hand money, but I do defer to, I think, the judgment that we're hearing today that it's probably in balance a better idea to keep with just getting the lease payments.
Teresa?
I agree.
Okay. Steve?
I also agree, and one of the things I really value here is the optionality, because we've got, if we continue as is, we've got that optionality for 45 years on a comparative basis. And when I modeled this, I continue that at the current rate, it totals out to the value of over $1 million, you know, when it compounds, as opposed to about $271,000 for option B. So I also, for a lot of reasons, but for the times, for brevity, I'll just say I'm good with continuing the existing lease.
Thank you. Carrie?
I'll just say I was opposed to the last lease assignment, and I continue to be opposed because I think that we are foregoing a significant amount of revenue by going with the option of selling the lease.
All right, it's unanimous. We're going to maintain the status quo. And I think that's a prudent judgment given that we did take the bird in hand in May. We augmented our reserve nicely, and I think this is a nice hedge against that. And I assume that after we say no, they are free to come back with a lump sum offer that is potentially larger, that might interest us a little bit more. But given the numbers that we're seeing here, it wouldn't make sense. And guys, I want to thank you both for your diligence, for working with us, and for stepping back and reassessing. I think that was very, very prudent of you, and we really appreciate it.
Well, we very much appreciate all the input, and we also thought through it and said, as Board Member Shapiro said, with the balance of having taken the bird in the hand in one case and taking the revenue stream in another, we get a little bit of both. It's a comfortable place to be.
All right. Well, thank you. So procedurally, that's what I'm getting to. Okay. Could I have a motion to not adopt the resolution? Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion made, a second received, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, 0, unanimous, decline to adopt the resolution. Thanks, guys. Really, yes.
Declined the offer.
Can I say one thing? I just want, Madam Mayor, members of the council or the board members, I'd just like to express appreciation to Yuri and Haley for just the good relationship in general, but the conversations we've had recently. So I just want to say
Yeah.
that on the record. The teamwork is greatly appreciated.
So thank you. Thank you. And just to reiterate our request to do what we can within reason to enhance the communication with the property owners at Bella Vista so that they have easy access to our deliberations, to our meetings and so forth. If you can do that technologically, we'd really appreciate it. Is that all right with the council? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. All right, this meeting is adjourned. Or did we, wait, did I forget something? Hold on. I'm sorry. I cut you off at the knees. Next item, GAD manager update.
Thank you, Chair Sauce. If the board would like, we did provide a brief presentation just in response to the items that the board members asked about the open space and our operations as such. So if you so choose, I could provide a brief update.
We have
Or do
4
you
minutes
have-
left.
Oh.
So
If we can bring it back another time, or I can distribute a summary to the board.
would you do that?
I
That
can
would be
totally do
great. Thank you.
Great.
I apologize for
No
cutting you
problem,
off.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Requests for future agenda items. None. Communications, none. Now we're adjourned. All right. Thank you very much. Good to see you, Yuri and Haley.
Thank you.